The first thing that we need to cover is how to turn the stock from square to round. Now, I'm going to show you different stages throughout different sections of the shop, but I'm not going to carry the camera with me. I'm simply going to cut it out and then start again once I'm at the next station or area. So let's get started. In order to find the dead center of the workpiece, there are a couple of things to keep in mind and a couple different ways of doing it. Now, the first method that I'm going to show you, I don't recommend, but it still works, I guess. You could take a straight edge and set it from corner to corner and make a mark, and then rotate the piece, set it from corner to corner and make another mark, and then where those two lines meet would be where you would put your center hole. Now, the problem with that is the dimension from side to side to side to side may not be equal in your material. So by only doing two sides of it, it's not ensuring that you're actually getting dead center of the wood. So what I recommend doing, and this is something that I've been doing for years and it works out great, whether it be square stock or round stock, build yourself a little jig. This jig, I bought the wood from Lowe's. It's just poplar, and I made the jig 17 inches long, considering that my stock is going to be 18 inches long. That gives me something in the background to kind of turn as I need to and work up here. You can build it however you like. The way it's laid out is I have one section here, one section here that is cut on a 45-degree angle and then glued to another piece of poplar that is a little bit wider. And then finally I have a piece of stock that is glued to the face of this, and it is lined up right where this piece and this piece meet. So that's where this lines up. And what that does is it gives you the ability to be able to center up round stock or even square stock and get it and make sure that it's perfect. Now this is how you do it. You drop it into the jig and you make one mark, rotate it 90 degrees, make another mark, rotate it 90 degrees, make another mark, rotate it 90 degrees, and then make your final mark. And what you end up with is this. You have a crosshatch pattern that has 4 lines, 2 going in each direction. The ideal spot to be putting your center is right here where all those lines come together. That will be your true center. Now, if you were to have used the single method that I showed you to begin with, you would have wound up with either this pattern or this pattern offsetting your stock. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to save as much material as you can. So let's go ahead and move to the other side. Again, just drop it in the jig, rotate 90 degrees, mark, 90 degrees, mark, 90 degrees, mark. And once again, in between all 4 lines is where you want to put your center punch, which is going to be the next step. So let me go ahead and get set up over there on the next area, and I'll be right back. Okay, what I've done is I've actually put this piece in the floor of the shop, because if I put it up on the bench that I normally do it on, the tripod isn't high enough to allow the angle so you guys can see what's going on. So anyway, we now have the piece in a vertical position, and we need to put a center hole on each end of it. Now, to do that, you need to have a center punch. Basically all this is just a piece of metal that comes down to a point, and it can be purchased at any hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, whichever you prefer. And all you want to do is, where these lines intersect, find that gap, put your pin right in the middle of it, and tap it a couple times. Now notice that I'm not hitting it very hard. I'm not driving it like a nail. If you drive too deeply, depending on the wood, it can cause the wood to split. All you want to do is simply put a little divot in there so it can be set onto the lathe. Let's go ahead and do the other side. Flip it over. Find the center of the cross hatches. Tap it a couple of times. And that's all you need. Now, there's one extra step that needs to happen on one end of this. You need to take what is called a spur driver, and what this is, this will go into your headstock, and it will turn and it will rotate your workpiece. It has a spring-loaded live center, and it has 2 teeth on each side. Well, actually 1 tooth on each side. And what you do is put that into the divot that you just created, tap it a couple times, and now what you have is your center hole, a divot on one side and a divot on the other. So once you put this piece into the machine, it now, as the machine turns, this acts like a gear and it turns your stock. So the next step is to get it on the machine, get the machine set up, and turn it from square to round. Okay, here we are over at the lathe. Now, as I was saying earlier, the next step is to simply get it on the machine and get it turned from square to round, get it down to size, which my size is 1.375 inches, and then finally put a sealer coat on it. So to do that, let me explain the setup that I have. Again, I'm using Todd Schultz Mid-America lathe for this specific process. Now if you look on the left hand side, and I'll be using little arrows to point these things out, look on the little left hand side at the headstock, and you will see that the spur driver that I used earlier to make the divot into one end of the stock is already been put into the headstock chuck. On the other end there is a live center, and there's dozens out there, just kind of pick your poison there. And the cross slide has a motor mount on it that holds the router, and that can also be purchased from the same place, Mid-America. And it also has an attachment which is a power feed. I do not recommend cutting any length of material with a manual wheel. In most cases you're going to get deflection, you're going to get chatter, it's going to take a lot longer, and it's going to be more involving for you. The best result is to simply get the power feed, put it on there, and it's adjustable. You can change your speed and feed rates. It's the best way to go, and you're going to get the smoothest finish. With a brand new cutter on it, which I use a 6-wing cutter, which I will show you here, that costs about $75 depending on where you get it from. One place has it for I think 50 bucks. The one I get it from is about 75 after shipping. It's a carbide tip 6-wing cutter, and if with this particular setup, once you get your stock turned and cut, it's almost sanded quality, ready for the sealer and to be hung up. So let's go ahead and get this set up, and we'll get it turned down. Now during the actual cutting process, I'm not even going to bother talking, because the router and the exhaust is going to probably outweigh my voice. So just kind of watch what happens. And what I'm doing is I'm going to be taking it from square to round, and it's going to be done in a couple different passes. So just bear with me and let me get this set up for you. Thanks. Now I'm going to turn on the dust collection system, so again, it might drown me out, but we'll see. Okay, now that we have it mounted, I'm going to be taking the pass to make it from square to round. Now, I already have this one set up to 1.375. I did that with another piece and just brought the machine to that piece. Now, once you get it set up to where it needs to be, whatever your dimension might be, again mine is 1.375, then you can literally run this all day in this setup, just piece after piece after piece, and it makes for great production. I mean, once it's set up and good to go, it pretty much stays that way. It holds its position very well. So let's go ahead and make our pass, get this turned down to size, and you're going to see what kind of cut this machine really can make. Now, let me say this as well. You don't want the lathe spinning at 3,000 RPM. You simply want it to turn just fast enough in correlation with the speed or feed rate of the tailstock, the cross slide, to create a smooth cut. If you're turning too fast and the feed is too slow, you're going to develop chatter. If the opposite occurs, you're going to develop chatter. So you got to find your happy medium depending on the machine that you're using. So let's go ahead and make the cut and we'll get it sealed up. Now, as you can see, with this setup, I'm taking a very, very deep pass. It's a very good rigid machine. And, other machines, it could take you 4 or 5 different passes to get this stock turned down. The way I have this one set up, I can do it in one pass. Seal it up, hang it up, and go on to my next piece. Now, what's happening right now, it's cutting from right to left. From right to left. And I have the cutter behind the material. The cutter is rotating clockwise, which means that it is cutting into the material from behind. That is called conventional milling. What I'm going to do is once it reaches the end of the stock, which will be here in just a minute, I'm going to run it back, not change the depth, run it back, and at that point it's going to be doing what's called climb milling, and that creates a much, much, much finer finish, almost to sanded quality. Now here's the final pass, and by the time it gets to the other end where it first began, you don't need to sand it. It's good enough to where you can go ahead and put the sealer on, hang it up, and let it rest. is almost done, and you know, it takes a few seconds. It needs to. You can't rush this. It has to take its time. Now, let me turn this dust collector off so you can hear me a little bit better. Okay, there we go. Now what you have is, originally we had a square stock like this, and we turned it down to the size that we need it to be at based off of the center marks that we made on both ends. Now the next step is to seal it, because you want to protect it from the elements in the environment. I mean, just because you're keeping it inside versus out in a barn or out in the front yard does not mean that it's not going to gather moisture. Every room in your house, every room in your shop, every room in the world has a moisture content in it. Now, in this particular shop, which is here at home, I keep the moisture level at 25% relative moisture content. That's about 9% moisture in the air, which is okay. I mean, theoretically, I really don't have to seal this piece of wood in that condition. But on the safe side, what I do, and it's a general rule of thumb, every single time that I make a pass on a piece of wood, I always seal it. Every single time. I don't care if I'm taking off 5/1000ths of an inch. I'm going to reseal it until the queue is finished. That way I know for a fact that it's covered, it's taken care of, there's no moisture getting in. It prevents warpage in the future. So let's get into the sealing process. Now, to seal it, you just turn the lathe back on, increase the speed just a little bit. This stuff, what it is, it's not super glue. It's pure cyanoacrylate, and it's made by Starbond, and you can purchase it from Amazon and a couple different other places. It's 16 ounces for, I think, $50, and it's consistency of water. Now this stuff, being so thin, really soaks into the wood to great depth, and it only takes one coat. Now again, you don't want this machine turning really fast, because all it's going to do is just sling it out back at you and in your eyes and on your clothes and everything else. Plus, you want it to be able to turn slow enough to where it can absorb. So let's go ahead and get that taken care of, and then I'll show you the final piece. Now what I'm doing, taking a napkin, folding it in half, fold it in half again, fold it in half one more time, and fold it in half again. That gives me a good pad to work with, using these two fingers, applying the cyanoacrylate up top and running my hand down. By the time I get from here to here, this pad is going to have soaked up a lot of the material. You don't want it getting through to your fingers. Again, I'm going to turn the machine back on, and I'm going to crank up the speed from what we just had a little bit higher, not much, just enough so it doesn't throw it back at me. And let's go ahead and put our coat on. Alright, now here again, I can't stress enough how water thin this stuff really is. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it is thin, thin, thin. So you don't want this turning too fast where it's going to throw it back on you. Take the cap off. Take the napkin that I just had, which I have seemed to have lost. I'll make another one real quick. Fold it in half. Fold it in half, fold it in half, fold it in half, and we're ready to go. I'll try to keep my arm out of the way while this process happens. Actually, better yet, I'm going to relocate the camera. That way, that problem doesn't occur. Okay, that's better. Now, I'm going to start from the same end that I began the cut from and apply it liberally. Just running down, steady, smooth pace, letting it soak into the wood. Get the ends, rub it in real good, catch your end, and you're done. That's it. Now you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it or not, but this stuff is very, very toxic. I mean, this is, unlike super glue, this is pure 100% cyanoacrylate. I need to turn the dust collector back on so I'm not breathing these fumes. Okay, there we go. I could already begin to smell it, make my eyes water. It's very important that you have the dust collection system going and well ventilation, because it's very dangerous stuff. It really is. You don't want to be inhaling it if you can help it at all. I had this happen a couple of years ago. Actually, I think it was early last year. The exhaust system was down and I kept producing anyway, and the fumes got into my eyes over the course of a day, and the next day I woke up and I couldn't see crap. I mean, I could see, but it was very fuzzy, hazy, and it took about 2 weeks for that to heal. So just be on the side of caution and take the measures that you need to keep safe. Now, this material is already dried, and I can turn the machine off. I'm going to leave the compressor running. This is already dried and sealed and is ready to be hung up. Now all you do is you take it, you put a little brass hook on it, hang it up in an area that you're going to be storing your materials, and you let it rest. Now once these fumes go away, I will turn the dust collection system back off so you can hear me better. Okay, now that we have that done, this is the final product. It has been cut, turned round down to 1.75. It has been sealed all the way across, and it's deep. And a hook has been put into the top of it. You just screw it into the center hole that you already had drilled. That way you maintain your center, and you hang it up. Now, people always ask, how long do you let it hang? It really depends on the material that you're using and the environment that you're in. If you're in the Arizona desert, it doesn't have to hang as long because it's a lot drier area. And if you're in the Philippines or Hawaii or places like that, it's going to take a lot longer to cure. So basically what you want to do, and a good rule of thumb, is anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. Hang this piece up, let it hang, leave it alone, put a date on it, and about, again, depending on the type of wood, about 2 weeks to 2 months, you can come back and you can take another pass on this and you can use it for parts. Now, in some cases, and this is quite often the case, you can order your material kiln dried, already sealed, still in square form, bring it into your shop, let it sit there for about a week, let it acclimate to your environment, and you can begin working. But just as a safe rule of thumb, I always let it hang, let it rest, and let it cure. Now, as I mentioned earlier, every single time that I take a pass on this wood, I don't care if it's 1/1000th of an inch, I'm going to reseal the wood, and that's going to help protect it and keep it where it needs to be, because ultimately you don't want to spend hours and hours and hours and invest tons of time into producing a cue that is only going to warp 6 months down the road after it's sold and developed. That wraps up the section for how to prep and store your stock. Thanks for watching. The next section, I'm going to be showing you how to cut parts and prep those and have them ready. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your purchase, and hopefully you'll be watching the next session. Thank you.